Hello everyone, my name is Nick Infernus, and welcome back to another comic book review. An unlikely trilogy has finished, so let's take a look at what's possibly the final movie in the Venom trilogy, The Last Dance. And I guess if you really want to, you can consider this my Halloween special, even though it's late. I meant to get this out last night, I promise. So the Venom movies are a bit of an oddity when it comes to comic book movies because from a filmmaking standpoint, you can't it's kind of hard to say that they're objectively good movies, but they work very well as guilty pleasures, or what Sean Chandler calls Taco Bell movies. I was blanking on what he calls them, but yeah, that's honestly the best name for these kinds of movies. Taco Bell movies. They're not great, but not they're not a waste of time either. They're fun, flawed movies, and honestly, that's probably the best way to describe this movie in particular. Because when compared to the other two Venom movies, honestly, I do find that this is the weakest one. I do still want to cover Let There Be Carnage at some point, but that'll have to be for another time. So for now, let's talk about Venom and Eddie's last dance. And for their last dance, it was a really smart move to make them the standout characters here. Tom Hardy, as always, in this role gives a really good performance as both Eddie and Venom. And I think what really helps with their relationship and their banter is that it is Tom Hardy talking to himself for the entire movie, but he's able to make both characters feel different enough to where it almost doesn't feel like that. You kind of forget that he voices both characters. That's something they do really well with the symbiotes in this movie, is that they have the actor voice both the host and the symbiote, but they're different enough to where they feel like, different performances, different characters. They don't feel like the same character in two different forms. And in general, they just have a really nice relationship where they can get on each other's nerves at times, but they're in this together no matter what. And I find that, their dynamic results in a lot of the better jokes in the movie, or the better humor, because in general the humor is pretty hit or miss. It's not like cringeworthy or anything. There aren't any jokes that had me rolling my eyes or face palming or anything. At worst, the jokes are just, there. Like, at worst, they're just not really worth making any noise over. At best, they can get some chuckles, but there's nothing that's like laugh out loud funny here. There's, chuckle worthy humor, and then just, meh, that was alright. But I do find that a lot of the chuckles do come from Eddie and Venom, not so much from anything else that tries to be funny. And the last thing I'll say that's positive about this before I get into the negatives is that the xenophages, the symbiote predators, is, I guess that's what they are. They're actually a really interesting part of the movie. They're very intimidating creatures with how, they have very like horrifying, creepy designs. They're like wild animals almost, and they're extremely hard to kill. It took a lot to finally put them down in the movie. So honestly, it does kind of feel like it feels a little weird to have these probably Avengers level in a Venom movie of all things. Then again, I guess you could make that same argument for Null, who I thought was used fine. I didn't really expect that he was going to be used all that much. But really, both him and the Xenophages, it felt a little weird to have them a Venom movie as opposed to, like, I don't know, Spider-Man 4. But for how they were used in the movie, they were used really well. So overall, I can say that I like this movie, but it's definitely got its problems. It has a lot of problems. The biggest problem is that the first and second acts are extremely flawed. The first act is very heavy on exposition, with explaining why Eddie and Venom are on the run, why Venom can't, come out as much, or at least go into full symbiote transformation, and also what the xenophages are, who Null is, why he's coming here. It's interesting enough to not be boring, but it's still a lot of nothing much happening outside of characters talking about, plot stuff. And then the second act is just pointless. Like, it's nice to see is it? I forget if it's Mrs. or Miss, but it's nice to see Miss Chen again, and it's interesting to see Reese Ifans playing a role that's not the lizard. But otherwise, the second act didn't really amount to anything, if I'm being honest. It's not really until the third act that stuff gets really interesting. I'm saying really a lot in this video. But yeah, it's not until the third act that things really start to pick up. But by then, that's already 2/3 of the movie gone, so I guess pick your poison. And plus, there's also very little action in the third act. I get why that's the case. I get there's a plot reason, but like, you couldn't give us an action scene with some of the other symbiotes. Like, they show Toxin early on. I'm sure you could. Is that his name? Is it Toxin? I forget. There's a lot of symbiotes in this movie. Excuse me. That's like at least one other fight in the first or second act, or at least the second act, because that's really like no action whatsoever in that act. Yeah, just a little bit more action could have helped it a little bit, but it's very light. It's like Iron Man 2 almost, where like all the action is saved for the third act. And to be fair, it is a very fun third act, but again, by the time you sat through 2 acts of exposition and pointless scenes, so it's hard to say if it's really worth it. And again, with the symbiotes, I think one more fight would have been nice because they don't really use the symbiotes that well. It's like they give us a lot. They give us, and this is a pretty big spoiler, but I don't really think anyone cares. It's a Sony Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man, so I'm gonna spoil it anyways. Like, they give us Toxin, they give us who else? Agony, Phage, Anti-Venom, Lasher. They give us a lot of different symbiotes, and yet they're kind of just used as cannon fodder for the xenophages, which, again, the xenophages are awesome, but they really should have done more with the symbiotes in this movie, especially because, it's the end of the Venom trilogy, so you'd think they'd go all out, and they kind of do, but not in the way that you would hope. So, overall, for Venom's Last Dance, it is a pretty underwhelming showing. It's not the worst thing ever. Like, it's not in the same length. It's not in the same kind of area as stuff like Thor: The Dark World or Eternals or Morbius or even Suicide Squad and Wonder Woman 84. But it's still not what I'd call a great movie, and I feel like I can only give it a 2 out of 5. It's got some fun there's fun to be had here, especially with Tom Hardy, and the xenophages are awesome, but there's just too much wasted potential here for me to rank it any higher. But anyways, guys, that's going to be it for my review on Venom: The Last Dance. If you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like and subscribe for more fun content. See you guys in the next video. Take care, and Godspeed.